Year after year, the playoffs provide the perfect opportunity for players and coaches to showcase what differentiates them from the rest. And it also allows front offices to figure out in which areas their teams have to make improvements to advance further in the following season. However, while it's normal for playoff contenders to look to add a major piece or two during the offseason, and for elite teams to add role players, championship organizations are expected to be able to bring back most of their core pieces to try to defend their title. But as we all know, Kawhi Leonard decided to take a different direction in the last summer to join the Clippers. And while many thought this move would produce an instant championship for Los Angeles and a mediocre season for Toronto, the results couldn't have been more distant from what ended up taking place. Welcome to Courtside. Today, we'll take a look at how the Leonard Raptors divorce worked out for both parts and talk about whether they would have been better by remaining together. Back in the 2018 offseason, the Raptors were facing one of the hardest situations any team can experience. They had been one of the best regular season teams in the past 3 seasons, but weren't able to make it past the conference finals. They appeared to have reached their ceiling as a team and were left with many questions following their second straight semifinals sweep at the hands of LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. At the moment, there seemed to be only 2 options for them going forward: make a blockbuster move to try to make a championship run, or push the rebuild button. And while it was a complicated decision to make at the moment, Masai Ujiri chose to trust his team and trade for Leonard shortly after he became available, even though there was no guarantee that he could play as a star or that he would return once his contract finished. Long story short, Kawhi proved to be the piece the team was missing as he led them to a finals victory over the Golden State Warriors to win the franchise's first NBA championship and received his second finals MVP award. But immediately after the season ended, questions were raised as no one knew what Leonard, a free agent at the moment, had in mind regarding his future as a player. The uncertainty led to much speculation for about a month as no words were coming out of his camp, and it had been reported that he would like to return home and play in Los Angeles. In fact, things were so strange that there was even a helicopter chase during this period. However, by July 10th, the basketball world finally had its answer. The Clippers had both signed Leonard and traded for Paul George in a move that turned them into favorites to win the championship. The move was something that had never been seen before. Out of 49 players that had won the finals MVP, none had left their respective teams, and the same goes for Jerry West, who received the award despite playing for the losing team. Still, there were no hard feelings from the Raptors, as they had been conscient all along that this was one of the possible outcomes. But if you asked them, they would have preferred to bring back the finals MVP for another year or 2. But Leonard didn't feel the same way. Aside from his desire to go home, it was recently reported that, at the time, he told the Raptors he didn't believe they were good enough to repeat as champions. And whether this was true or not, it would have been a bold statement, to say the least. Yet, he wouldn't have been the only one thinking the same. And as soon as the transaction was confirmed, the talk turned into how good the Clippers would be on the following season and how the Raptors should consider rebuilding once and for all. Of course, Ujiri once again decided to trust his players and brought back the same core that won the championship just a few months ago. This resulted in most people talking about how Toronto's title defense would be one of the most mediocre ones in recent years. However, Toronto didn't pay any attention to the criticism and instead decided to focus on its play as a team. As the season progressed, they proved everyone wrong by having one of the best defenses in the league and again being among the best teams in the regular season. The changes in the team's roles saw the emergence of Pascal Siakam as their scoring leader and an all-star talent, as well as an overall improvement from Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, and other of their young players. By the end of the regular season in the Orlando seeding games, the Raptors had finished with the best winning percentage in franchise history, were again the Eastern Conference's second seed, Nick Nurse was named as Coach of the Year, and Siakam made the All-NBA second team. Most people still doubted their chances as a contender before entering the bubble, but following a 7-1 record in the seeding games and a first-round sweep of the Brooklyn Nets, there were no doubts about their status as one of the league's best teams. On the other side of things, Leonard and the Clippers were also doing pretty good. The Claw took a step forward as his new team's clear star by posting career highs in his scoring and assists average as he finished with 27.1 points, 6.4 rebounds, 4.9 assists, and 1.8 steals per game. As a team, the Clippers didn't exactly coast through the regular season as most of their rotation players would miss significant time to injury, but regardless of that, their overall talent and depth helped them secure the second seed in the Western Conference, and they looked formidable during the short stretches in which they played at full strength. Inside the bubble, they didn't perform as well as the Raptors, but finished with a 5-3 record in the seeding games before facing the Dallas Mavericks in the first round of the playoffs. While many expected them to defeat the Mavs without too much trouble, the play of Luka Doncic and the struggles of Paul George made the series longer than expected. However, Leonard proved to be too much for Dallas to overcome as he averaged 32.8 points, 10.2 rebounds, 5.2 assists, and 2.3 steals per game, and posted 33 points, 14 rebounds, 7 assists, and 5 steals in the deciding Game 6 to join Michael Jordan as the only 2 players to have such a line during a playoff game. Things were looking good for both the Raptors and the Clippers up until that point, but then the second round happened. The defending champions put an outstanding effort against the Boston Celtics in a series that wasn't decided until the last few moments of Game 7. But ultimately, they came up short and weren't able to return to the conference finals. Still, their season ended somewhat like a feel-good story in which they were able to prove their worth as a team despite most people counting them out before it even started. On the other hand, things didn't look quite as good for Los Angeles. They took a 3-1 series lead before watching the Denver Nuggets make a historical comeback to spoil the All-LA Conference Finals that everyone had been expecting. The Clippers were unable to close the Nuggets out despite holding large advantages in Games 5, 6, and 7, and their offense collapsed during their final game of the season as Leonard scored just 14 points on 6 for 22 shooting. He and George combined for a total of just 24 points and both made a disappearing act during the second half as they totaled more turnovers together than made shots. But now, as both Leonard's and Toronto's seasons have ended, it's fair to question how far they could have gone had they remained together. Last year, their defining moment came, coincidentally, in Game 7 of their second-round series against the Philadelphia 76ers, where they managed to get over a stacked Sixers team with a complete team effort and a Leonard game-winner buzzer beater. But while they were supposed to go in completely different directions this year, their seasons ended in the same way, and in a situation they had managed to get over together. For the Raptors, their downfall was the lack of a go-to scorer. They're probably the best team when it comes to getting everyone involved in both ends of the court, but when Siakam started to struggle, they had a hard time finding an offensive rhythm. And while Lowry and Van Vliet made a huge effort to make up for Siakam's poor performance, their play wasn't enough for the Raptors to defeat a Celtics team that's just as versatile and deep as they are, if not more. The Clippers, on the other hand, had the opposite problem. They had a roster that included at least 4 players that could be closers for any given team and was arguably the deepest in the NBA when it comes to overall talent. But they didn't have the chemistry required to respond when faced against adversity. Their time together during the regular season was not enough to develop a good rhythm and create a winning strategy, and injuries didn't help with this. The fact that players didn't have clear roles caused them to have too many lapses on both ends of the court, and this was exploited by a Nuggets core that has been growing together for 4 years. In short, both parts ended up missing exactly what the other could provide for them. We should probably start looking at their championship run with different eyes now. After all, when they managed to defeat the Warriors in the finals last year, the story told was how Leonard came back from an injury-plagued season to lead an underwhelming Raptors team that couldn't make it out of the East despite their regular season success. But Toronto proved to be much more than that, and Leonard proved that, despite his immense talents, he needs a solid team around him to be able to effectively contend for a championship. That's exactly what he had in both San Antonio and Toronto, a situation where players had clear roles and were willing to embrace them and a clear strategy to go to whenever adversity came up. And while it's not probable that he'll look to get out of the Clippers during this offseason, both his contract and George's expire in 2021. So, if Los Angeles is not able to figure things out and get closer to a championship by then, they might end up without the stars for which they gave so much just a year ago. If that happens, Kawhi should take into consideration that the Raptors were just a few shots away from returning to the conference finals without him, and that, together, they could have provided both the Miami Heat and the Lakers with a serious challenge for the championship. But for the moment, we'll have to pay close attention to Toronto's financial moves during the upcoming offseason to have a clearer look at how they'll prepare for the 2021 free agent class. Could a reunion between them and Leonard take place by then? Only time will tell, but we would surely love to see that happen. All in all, the Raptors' championship run was the latest example of how the combination of a great system and one of the league's best players can result in a title, and it could become the base for how organizations decide to build their rosters in the future. On the other hand, the 2020 playoffs proved that Leonard's decision of leaving Toronto might not have been the best for his career. Had he decided to remain there, he probably would still be playing for a title right now. But fans in Canada and part of Los Angeles can only look forward to the adjustments their respective teams will need to do before the next season starts. And now, what do you think about how things turned out for both parties? Would you have preferred to see them remain together? Let us know in the comments. We are Courtside.